Well, the first frame that we're going to teach you to impose is the first frame that you're going to need to win with a customer. It's called the icebreaker. Now, what is an icebreaker and why do we need it? Well, for many types of sales, now, albeit this is slightly more pertinent to various types of cold calling and lead generation, so things like doors and residential shopping centers, telemarketing, things like that. Although you still want to be able to establish some semblance of this in a higher ticket consultation role as well. An icebreaker is something that helps you avoid the dreaded two words that new salespeople hear all the time: not interested. A customer will tell you, "I'm not interested," as early as possible to avoid the interaction. Now, novice sales agents and rookie sales agents sometimes take this personally, or it's really the reason a lot of people say, "Oh, I could never do sales." They don't like the idea of being rejected. Well, you can drastically decrease the amount of times you hear those awful two words by doing one thing. Establish a great frame early that you're fun and you're there to have a good time. Hence the icebreaker. So a traditional icebreaker, you're really trying to understand why a customer wouldn't be interested. If you actually track this, right? Well, what's the customer not interested in? Well, it's not necessarily that they're not interested in the product or the service or the benefit that it'll create. They're not interested in every boring sales pitch they've ever had. They're not interested in having their time wasted by someone who's not going to give them a good experience and someone who's going to try and profit from their loss. Well, that's a simple fix. We need to win the frame early that we're there to provide them support and to have a good time. Hence the icebreaker. So it can be something very simple as even if, let's say it's cold calling, assuage their concerns that you're a traditional style of sale. So let's say I'm selling something door to door. I say, now, don't worry, I've got great news. I'm not here to change your religion or put solar panels on your roof. Something as simple as that will make the customer laugh if your timing's right, but it'll also establish that you're not here to sell them anything that they don't want. No offense to anyone who does do religious work. I think it's a fantastic ideal that you do, but you get the idea. So being able to make a joke right away that you're there to have a good time, or again on the doors, you say, "Hey, how are you today?" And the customer says, "I'm great, how are you?" I say, "I'm fantastic." "Well, look, no one's turned the hose on me or sick the dogs on me yet, so I can't complain." "What's the story? You scored that work?" So if I'm very quickly establishing that I'm funny and I'm confident and I'm there to have a good time, the customer is drastically more likely to want to listen to what I have to say, because at the very, very, very worst case scenario, they're going to have a good time. Now, you're not always going to get someone that goes, "Oh, great." Sometimes people will do that congruence test that I mentioned before. They'll say, "Well, what are you selling?" or "What do you want?" or they won't give you much in response. And there are strategies that we'll talk about there, specifically things like labeling or addressing their concerns right off the bat, or even handling objections before you even start. But we'll talk about that later. Right now, we're going to talk about establishing that frame. So again, this goes back to what we call the salesman frame. You do not want, under any circumstances, to be a salesman right off the bat. Whether that's high ticket or low ticket or consultation, if it's the third time you've seen a customer or first time, you want to make sure that they know your intentions. If their natural assumption of what your intentions are to make a commission. That's what people think of salespeople. So you need to establish right away that you're not a salesman, you're there to coach or support them. That's why a lot of businesses use the word consultant or things like that. They don't use the word sales rep anymore, because it does have a negative connotation. You're not there to sell, you're there to help the customer. You're an advisor, right? You're there to provide them support and answer their questions. That's what real sales should be about. So being able to establish as early as possible that you're there for the right intentions, that's a powerful use of an icebreaker. Even just being able to say that I'm humorous and I'm jovial and I'm not concerned by the potential negativity out there, you're establishing what I call a good guy or good girl frame. The other thing that you really want to note about icebreakers is that more often than not, especially when you're dealing with things like real estate or high ticket sales, where there's a really big commission on the line, when you're dealing with high net worth customers, but this can even be for lower ticket, 90% of what they buy is buying you. If price isn't really a concern for them, what they're doing is supporting you and what you do. Think about this. If you go to a restaurant and you get a really good server, you're likely to give that server a tip. And this is coming from Australia, where they don't do a natural 20% gratuity. Even so, if you get a great waiter, you're likely to tip. If you get a poor waiter, you're not going to tip them very much. Well, the same goes for salespeople. If you do a really good job, if you're very knowledgeable, if you make the customer feel safe, if you make them feel understood and listened to, and if you really help them make their life better through what you're doing, they're not going to have any problem paying that higher price. So when you're establishing that coach frame, or you're establishing a frame that you're there to provide a good experience and be a good person, if you can win that early, you're drastically more likely to get a bigger commission from that customer. People buy you. And if you can get your head around that, then your likelihood of making sales will go drastically higher.